What's up, YouTube people? Glad to have you here, and let's dive in. All right. Would it be good for me to go to group therapy or group coaching?
Okay, we're going to review before we get into the question. This review, the subject is called "Very Applicable to All Aspects of Life." It's a good review. We're going to read just an excerpt from that. I was once betrayed in my past marriage, and having this opportunity to listen to all sides of the story helps me process mine. I'm able to understand myself, my ex, and be able to step back and see my experience and learn from it in ways that give back to me daily. Man, that's pretty valuable.
Awesome.
Right? I think especially since this individual has the courage and like the desire internally to say, I want to actually listen to this because I want to go back and have a good scrub on where things were in my relationship. I think it's like really cool, and the fact that this individual is gaining from it is awesome.
Awesome. Keep doing the hard work.
Yeah, for sure. That'll pay dividends in a big way. I think that's a big misnomer that a lot of people have. If I can divorce myself from the partner, I'll divorce myself from the problem. But that still necessitates work, so It's cool to see that taking place.
Totally true.
Okay, group.
Yeah, so group. I think, if there's anything that you and I are experts on, it's group processing, group therapy. So just a little bit of background to talk about why we can really speak to this.
Yeah.
I have developed several programs for betrayal trauma and sex addiction, group programs, and trained therapists on how to run groups and how to do group work.
In many clinics.
Yeah, different clinics. And so I've spent countless hours in group therapy.
I can't imagine.
And a ton.
I cannot imagine.
And I love group work. It invigorates me. At one point, I was running way too many groups, and so now I have a really good balance. I still run group. I enjoy it, and it's an important part of my work. So, but I know all about whether or not group is a good thing or an unhelpful thing for somebody. Mm-hmm. And what I hope we can do today is really describe why group is so powerful, why it is so important, and hopefully get our audience thinking a little bit, hey, maybe that's the missing link, the thing that I may need. Or maybe I'm in a group and it's a problem for my recovery right now. So Coby, talk about your experience with groups.
I think what's important I'll talk about my experience with groups because Brannon, you taught group for me like in the very, very beginning of recovery, which is rad. But just to draw a distinction, Brannon, you perform and you lead processing groups, whereas on my end, I definitely take a very big step away from processing and focus on a skill set and focus on accountability for that skill set and how to develop that. So there's a very big distinction. We'll touch on that later. Yeah. But as far as my own experience with group, wow, I still, in my mind's eye, have this little movie of me walking into group for the very first time, and I still remember the arrogance that I brought in with me. I completely remember that. And I was the one that wanted to go into group, but I had this experience with group like in various 12-step settings where guys had shared stuff, and I was like, yeah, I'm nowhere near as bad. So I brought in my own I'm unique arrogance, right? I'm not as bad as the average Joe.
Never experienced that before with guys in group. That never happened.
Never at all.
Yeah, they're a lot worse than me, and I kind of got it figured out.
I sang that story for so long, but I can tell you, it was really, really important for me to go to group. It was a super important part of this because there was one aspect that was totally true for me of my own experience in addiction, and that was nobody knew. Nobody knew. Friends didn't know. Parents didn't know. that I had this deep struggle. Ashlynn found out,
Right.
but I certainly didn't share it with her. And so because of that, I was on my own little island, and I was so isolated from people. Moreover, my shame, my narrative in my head that was saying, I am no good because here again is another relapse.
So,
Group helped me so many ways. working out of that.
addiction, and this is one of the big ones though that you're hitting off right off the get go here. Addiction creates isolation, and betrayal trauma creates isolation, and so when you recognize that, and you go and you step into a group and you start connecting with other people about addiction, you're actually acting directly against what addiction does.
And that's why it was probably hard for me the first, I don't know, Brandon, it was probably hard for me the first number of weeks, probably a month or so, give or take. It was hard for me to let go of the discomfort. I had to really get to this place of accepting, all right, this is me. This is reality. There's no like Z-Pack for me that I'm going to get in the first 5 days.
If you know what, it's uncomfortable. Why is it so uncomfortable?
Because I've never acknowledged in such a public setting that I have this issue.
Totally. So there you are, your face is being seen.
Yeah.
People know you're here for a reason.
Yep.
And what that reason is. And I got to say, betrayal trauma groups are just as difficult to show your face and to be in and to start your processing.
Really?
As addiction groups, yeah. But there you are, and it's kind of like you're outing yourself.
Yeah.
And there you are in all your denial, and thinking, you're going to work your way through this. Hopefully you're showing up with some humility.
Yeah. That took a minute.
Yes.
That took a minute for me.
So let me back up a little bit, something you said earlier. There's different types of groups. So, and let's just address this. There's what's called psychoeducational groups.
Okay. Yeah.
And what that is like a classroom type setting.
Yeah.
Where it's heavy on the education, and not so much on the processing. And psych ed can be really, really helpful.
Oh man.
Like powerful.
It totally was for me. It was imperative.
And you
for me.
started in psych ed, right?
Yes.
And it was powerful. Why?
Because I had scientific research and evidence, empirical evidence, that although I had this huge struggle, there was actually science behind it that indicated, like that kind of defined the path that from when I first started to where I got. I was like, it was kind of like known, like this is how that process kind of takes place. But then this is a process that gets you out of that place.
There's nothing, I think, more, nothing that feeds hope more than education.
Yeah.
And so when you go and when you're educated, you're like, oh yeah, that's really what's going on with me.
Yeah.
That's me.
It's relieving in
Yes,
some way to say
validating.
like, okay, I'm not totally effed up and I'm not this anomaly. Okay, there's other people like me, but then there's also like actual science behind this that says, yeah, my brain just, when I'm stressed, it goes right into this pathway of seeking porn or masturbation or talking with somebody else. Wait, I've developed that in my head?
Right.
What?
Right, but when you can recognize that, yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
But then you're also educated on this is where you could go.
Yeah.
It starts to open up possibility.
Yep.
And you're not just stuck in the emotion of what you're going through.
Yes.
It's like, oh, I get it now. I can see what I'm going through, and I can see other ways, other paths that I could take. That this therapist is outlining to me. So it's really helpful that those psych ed groups to start there. The thing about it is though, Coby, that psych ed doesn't solve the problem.
No.
And the reason is because in order to really shift out of addiction or shift out of the fear with betrayal trauma, you have to experience something different. You have to go through an experience and feel it within your heart, within your soul, that something is different. And that's what psych ed group, or not psych ed, that's what psychotherapy groups do. The processing groups.
Okay.
Now, I want to talk about the the third type of group that you were talking about, accountability groups. Accountability groups, I believe, go very well with processing groups.
Yeah.
So when accountability groups provide the structure and the support to set up your life, to have life balance, so that you can do the rigors of the psychotherapy groups, right? And I think hand in hand. Now, if you just do one or the other, it's still good for you.
Totally is.
Right? But the really, Coby, you're all about what I call recovery capital, which is having these inputs in your life, having the accountability around your life, be able to really succeed, right?
Yeah,
and that's what an accountability group is. A psychotherapy group, we're starting to go after the roots of the issue, right?
Yes, the first time that I had to actually tell my story out loud, and that's never done in my groups, in my accountability groups. That was done in this processing group setting that you're talking about. This,
Yes.
I mean, Brannon, that was such a heart-pounding and scary thing to verbalize it.
Yes.
And I only had like I think I was one of like 6 or 7 guys in this group, but it was so scary. It was so scary to actually tell the story from when I was first exposed to what brought me to that group at that time, and to actually say it out loud. But once that happened, right? Once the first guy shared, and then the next guy shared, and it was my turn, it was like, wait a second, like something's happening in the group, and it's like I don't feel so isolated. I don't feel so alone. I don't feel so horrible because of what I've done. And I'm realizing that I'm more like these guys. And moreover, the guys that I were looking at like, oh yeah, you too, I was now like looking at them with a lot of compassion and empathy. And because they were vulnerable enough to share it, but also I was like, your experience has been like mine. I didn't think anybody else's was like mine.
All of a sudden, that tunnel vision, or that big heaping pile of shame that you're trapped under, that you can't see out of.
Yeah.
You're actually listening to another guy's heaping pile of shame, and you're saying, wait, that's what I'm trapped under.
Yes.
And I'm not the only one. And you start connecting in your pain, really.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so let me walk you through a little bit, kind of the process. And
Okay.
Coby, you've been through this. But before I do, what I want to say is group. I also want to speak to what the therapist does in a group.
Okay, that's great.
Group therapy, not all groups are good. Some groups can become problematic. And if there's not enough good energy in there, people who really desire recovery, they can actually start to be toxic to each other.
Okay.
And most groups that I run aren't that way, because the clientele that I get are coming wanting change. But sometimes they want to stay stuck in their pride, in their denial, and that they'll start to support each other in that and back each other up in that. And I'll actually shut groups down sometimes. When I see that happening, or what I'll do is I'll insert a couple of like really good
healthy guys
like who, and they'll start to turn the tide in that group. And then when the group is working, there's nothing more powerful. It's amazing. So what happens is the denial that an addict is in, sometimes the person struggling with addiction doesn't even know how dishonest they actually are. And
me? Yeah, that's totally me.
Yeah, so they're bumping around, justifying things, minimizing things, irrationalizing things, and using all different forms of denial. And there's no one better to point out denial than somebody who's used that form of denial a lot. And when they get educated about what that denial is, there's this really uncomfortable thing that happens in group where they start calling each other out in their denial. Like, hey, it really feels like you're justifying that.
Yeah.
Or you're totally minimizing that so you can get away with it.
Yeah.
And the person they're confronting in a good group will have this feeling of like, oh shoot, dang it, you caught me, but thank you. Right?
Yeah.
And if that's what's going on in the group, then they're eager to help each other stay honest and keep things on the surface and stay transparent in their lives. And it's really powerful when it starts to work.
Okay, so what's the kind of what are the primary objectives, mile markers, benchmarks in a processing group when you start from day one?
Great question. So number one, have a little bit of connection, like what you talked about.
Okay.
Where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone.
Okay.
Next, get honest. Learn how to get honest in a group.
Okay.
So instead of being able to manipulate the group like you have everything else in your life, the group actually helps you turn that tide around. Okay. Once you get honest, you start to build some real connection. Because now you're honest with each other. You're brothers. You're connected. You see the real them, not the fake them anymore. As that connection builds, you start to experience love and empathy with these people in your group.
Yeah.
And you start to experience that, which is different than what you felt with your addiction.
Yeah.
But it takes vulnerability. It takes vulnerability on everybody's part to step into that. Once you have that love, that empathy, and that connection, we're not done yet, Coby.
Cool.
You actually go into some processing of trauma and identity as to who you really are, and you have your group members be a part of that so that they can see some of the most vulnerable fears that you have, and you can root those fears out when you have that support and that love next to you of your group members.
So if I'm hearing you, what you're saying is you connect, you get a little bit of vulnerability to realize you're not alone. Then you work on being honest, and so you can show up being real and authentic.
You learn how to trust each other.
You learn how to trust each other and trust that the guys in the group, or for instance the women in the group, are going to help you live authentically when you might not realize that you're in denial of in some capacity.
Now, I do want to say the betrayal trauma content is somewhat different than this.
Okay.
And I can talk about
So let's do that. We'll circle to that one as well. But then once everybody's in this rhythm of being in a vulnerable, honest, and place of non-denial.
Yes.
Then we start to talk about traumas that people have experienced that have led to addiction, or identity that has come as a result of trauma or experiences. Is it like family, culture, and dynamics? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, and yes, that will start to come out. And what else will come out is their current relationship issues. So their attachment issues.
Okay.
And talking through being an honest person in their relationship. How to have empathy, how to connect. So it's looking at the trauma and the trauma wounds, but it's also seeing the trauma play out in their current life.
Okay.
Right? And practicing how to be a vulnerable, authentic person in their life to create connection all around.
So it's like a little microcosm of life in this processing group that the hope is that they'll be able to extend that vulnerability, honesty, connection to like their partner or other trusted people in their life.
Yes.
To begin to live authentically and connect.
And the therapist the therapist job
totally makes sense.
Yeah, and I really want to shout out to all the therapists out there, because we're all awesome. So
that's got to be really tough, and I totally agree with you on that.
Well, okay, you take 8 people who don't know how to be transparent, honest, vulnerable people. And you think of the first day of group, it's extremely awkward.
Yeah.
Really uncomfortable. You've been there, Coby, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's the therapist's job not to work the recovery for them, but it's the therapist's job to create a context where there is only accountability and honesty.
Okay.
A context of love and support and compassion, but also push them to do things differently than what they normally do in their life.
Okay.
And to just maintain that type of energy in the group no matter what. And when it starts to go south, to be strong enough to be able to bring it back up. And then also pull certain parts of like what the group members are going through as teaching moments and learning moments and opportunities. And you're doing all of that while you're managing time and making sure everybody gets a fair go in group.
Tough.
Right?
Talk about
So,
being boundaried, right?
yeah. I mean, you do it, Coby.
Well, yeah, it's not an easy one. And a lot of times you have to. It's kind of like it's kind of like Pirates in the Caribbean, where they say, "Where is the big huge book that they have? Where's the code?" Right? And the code's written down, and then Captain Overboss is like, "Yeah, these are more like guidelines." Right? A lot of times you have to institute the idea of like, okay, we're going to call an audible here and allow X amount of more time or for this individual because of their situation or because this person's having such a traumatic moment. We're going to like let them just kind of slide this week because they just need to like come back to the group, get out of their own head. That's not. And then knowing when to leverage trust to literally say, I'm going to ask permission to stretch you in your bones, like in your soul, with what I'm going to ask
push you.
Yes, exactly.
And you might hate me for saying this, but I love you, so I'm going to say
it. Yes. Okay, so talk about, Brannon, if you will, before we get into anything accountability, talk about women's processing groups.
Okay.
Because I remember Ashlynn kind of in the similar boat as me, just like walking in and going like, what am I doing? Like, is this really my life?
So the women's groups that I've run, I just love running, and it's different. So, as a partner who's been betrayed, your healing process is different than the person who has an addiction. It's if one person has a broken leg and one person has a broken collarbone, they're going to do different things at physical therapy.
True.
Okay, but a lot of the same principles apply. So things like learning how to practice acceptance, radical acceptance.
Okay.
Going through the grieving process. So working them through a process to come to terms with their new reality. And also getting out of their isolation and fear and the shame around what's happened in their life is really important. And so when they can do that together and connect with each other, one of the big problems with betrayal trauma groups is at first it feels really good to get some validation. And you get validation by, one, the therapist educating you, saying, look, this is what betrayal trauma is, this is what you're going through. They can put words to it, and they're like, yes, that's it, I feel good, right? Then you also get validation from the other women's pain. Oh, you're in pain, I'm in pain too. We're not alone. Mm-hmm. This feels good. And that's actually an important part of the process. But where things can get stuck with a betrayal trauma group is right there. Is the therapist or whoever's running the group can just sit right there and just sit and complain about how difficult their husband is, and for good reason. The women who are in pain feel validated, but eventually it starts to stagnate, and they realize, oh my gosh, we're not moving forward. I don't feel better when I come here and talk about how much pain I'm in. And the women's groups that really thrive are the ones that recognize, okay, I've been hurt, I've been betrayed, but now I want to do my own healing process and move forward. And the therapist can start to provide tools, start to talk about life purpose, and just finding hope and finding healing beyond betrayal. Betrayal doesn't need to be the perspective that you look through for the rest of your life, right? And that's where real healing happens, is in that process.
Wow.
So
it was a really I know this for sure. Ashlynn did some psych ed, right? To learn about addiction, to learn about betrayal, and that was a really key component for her as well, in being able to distinguish when is Coby in addict mode and when do I have Coby,
right?
And that was a really key function. And she did a shame group as well, which is kind of, I think it was like dual purpose, right?
A lot of what we talk about in the betrayal trauma groups is shame resiliency. That's right where I'm at with my women right now. We're talking shame resiliency, and with shame resiliency then comes your healthy boundaries and learning how to show up authentically and empowered as a partner. And so it's really important as a partner, you're as healthy as you can be so you can protect yourself. but not disconnect and not just push away.
Yeah.
But be able to create connection if needs be, but also create protection for yourself at the same time.
So a question on that. What have you observed when you work with two partners? I know you've worked with loads of couples where you have a partner who's been betrayed. What's the effect in that person's relationship when they can move through the betrayal trauma group in a successful way and gain tools and be vulnerable versus a partner who gets stuck? What's the impact?
Oh my gosh.
In both of those relationships.
Well, I mean, the one has a possibility for a healthy relationship, the other doesn't. And really, if you want a healthy relationship after betrayal trauma and sex addiction, you both need to do your work. And what's awesome, what I love to see is partners who go forth and they do their work, they get vulnerable in these groups, they grow so much because of this betrayal thing that their partner did, and they recognize, oh my gosh, like this has given me opportunity to really step into who I am and love myself and understand myself more than I ever have. And so at the end of those betrayal trauma groups, or when they leave, they recognize, I feel alive. I feel like I can move forward. The sun comes up every day and I see it. And my happiness and my well-being has nothing to do with that partner of mine. I'm moving forward regardless.
That's cool. Okay, so let's transition, and let's talk just real quick about accountability groups.
Okay.
And again, I totally agree with what you're saying. Is like if you have access to group, whether it's online, because you guys conduct groups.
We have some online groups.
Online groups, right? And I think that's I don't know that was a thing. In fact, it wasn't aware of that being a thing for me early in recovery. So the fact that is an option, huge deal. But as far as accountability groups are concerned, really this is just a matter of saying, okay, let's just put down some skills. Let's put down some let's have everybody list some boundaries and some bottom lines that will keep them safe.
So structures.
Yes, structures. And let's just say, let's account for how we work against these metrics every day.
Yes.
In some kind of check-in thread, whether that's Marco Polo or WhatsApp or whatever the case is. And then once a week, let's get together and let's just account for our week overall and be vulnerable. But the difference between this and a step group would be the ability for group members to exchange ideas, to extend empathy and understanding and support and love, and while challenging, like you had talked about,
yes.
And sharing best practices sometimes, because a lot of the stuff with like for instance, structured living. Right?
Yes.
Like that stuff, it's just insane to me. I don't know about you, but the people that I've worked with over the years have been wildly successful in academia, whether they're students, going to college,
right,
or they're high school students, or they're professionals, or whatever the case is. They've been wildly successful in their career, and they possess the same skills in their career that they're desperately lacking in the arena personally of recovery.
Yes.
And they can't see how those same best practices, the same structured living, actually work. They can be just essentially just copied and cut and then pasted into their recovery life.
Yes.
Because the lens of shame that they use in not knowingly in their own eyes about where they are and their struggles blinds them from all of that.
Right.
So the whole objective with accountability is to say, let's just pick up some skills. Let's be scheduled. Let's be organized. Let's find best practices. Let's use time management. Let's get out of like perfection or failure. So a lot of times it's helping guys figure out how they can do small, sustainable dailies, for example,
Absolutely.
without going to the extreme of like, I'm going to do this for, I'm going to go from not doing anything to going to an hour-long spin class, 5 days a week. It's like, how about we maybe start with some walking first?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Because
Yes.
oftentimes it's the shame that can propel people into a place of action that's not sustainable.
I'll do intakes, Coby, and at the end of the intake, I'll say, look, you need EMDR, you need group therapy, you need this, and then I'll say, and you know what else you need? You need a good night's sleep. You need to journal a little bit.
Totally, right?
Yeah, and just those little structures, I'll say that's just as therapeutic as this deep work.
Yeah.
And so, I love it, Coby. I'm a big proponent of accountability groups because that structure is so important and awesome, and the work you do is really, really important. I hope you understand that.
Yeah,
Coby.
thank you.
Yeah,
I can echo kind of the same thing that you shared about your own groups where they're invigorating for me, and I oftentimes walk away saying that I took away more from this group than any of you guys did, and I've got no way to prove that.
Right.
But I do feel like I've just gleaned so much from the exchange, from the vulnerability, from the connection,
Yes.
from the exchange. But also it's like there's guys who come to groups some weeks and are having a horrendous time.
right.
And whereas, Johnny Lunchbucket the week before was having a really great time.
Right.
And so there becomes it's like this ever evolving little ecosystem of support and help. And because there's so much connection and vulnerability and honesty, they know how to help them along and say, you can do this, encourage them and say, don't forget your tools, man. You can leverage this stuff to get you where you want to go.
To kind of wrap this up, Coby, going along with what you're saying, I have group members who were in group 9 years ago, and they are like brothers still. And
that's cool.
And women's groups that, they were totally isolated and alone, and they have sisters now. And when I talk about brothers and sisters, I'm talking about they can call each other in the middle of the night and say, hey, I'm struggling. Or can I come sleep on your couch? Or I just need to work through something right now because, I'm going into my drama and I can't connect right now. So help me see my denial here. And to have those type of people and support in your life is a game changer.
Yeah.
Like total game changer. And they will hold you up and they will hold you out of addiction and out of getting stuck in the fear cycles of betrayal.
Yeah. It's funny that you bring that up because Ashlynn also runs accountability groups. And the format's fairly similar. There's some variations and so forth in the metrics that are used. But Ashlynn has a group of women who are going to, drive or fly across the country to get together to have their own little like pseudo retreat.
Yeah.
And this was happening all the while Ashlynn was just dealing with, and she still is dealing with, the death of her father. Like they're all like, we're not going to like necessarily hit her with this yet, but we're going to like organize this and plan this because we want to get together because there's such deep love and there's so much bonding that's taking place.
Right.
So they said, hey, FYI, Ashlynn, like we planned this, we're going to get together. Love to have you. And so Ashlynn's gonna go and partake of that. But that's the kind of stuff that is on the other side of this really big fear about being in a group or airing your quote unquote dirty laundry in front of people.
I don't want my face to be seen because then my neighbor might be there. Well, you know what? Go anyways. And if your neighbor's there, then he's probably freaking out that you're there. And so you'll connect.
Yes.
And I'm better than them. My problem's not as bad as theirs. So why should I have to go? Go anyways. And you realize you got just as much denial going on.
Yeah, it's the truth.
It takes courage and vulnerability. And Coby, you were a great example to your group. I saw this happen where it's just like, the answer is yes, we're going to do this group thing and it's going to work. And your group bonded quickly and it was a solid group. It was a good group,
cool.
Right?
I still have contact with guys in that group when that was, years ago.
Yep.
Years ago. And they're of the most rich relationships, like human relationships that I have.
Because not many people know you on that level.
Yeah, for sure. for sure. So, guys, glad you're here. This is a very shareable episode, simply because it will give you a peek behind the curtain as to what group can do for you, whether you're the betrayed, whether you're the addicted. And if you haven't yet, hop over to iTunes, go ahead and rate and review. Love to hear from you. And thanks for being here.
Yep. See you guys.